Ambassador Alara Chen stood alone in the center of the Galactic Council chamber. The room was enormous, built to hold representatives from 4,000 species. Crystalline spires rose toward a ceiling that displayed the stars themselves. For 12,000 years, this chamber had been the heart of galactic civilization. No species had ever left the council willingly. Today that would change. In her palm, Alara held a small glowing chip. It was called a resignation chip, and according to council records, no one had activated one in living memory. The chip felt warm against her skin. She had carried it for 3 days, waiting for this moment. Around her, the representatives of the galaxy watched with expressions ranging from amusement to contempt. The Velkari delegation, with their tall silver bodies and 4 eyes, whispered among themselves. The Dominion of Thrace, massive creatures covered in thick armor plates, did not bother to hide their smiles. They had waited 200 years for this day. High Chancellor Yothmari rose from his seat at the center of the highest tier. He was ancient, even by Velkari standards, and he had opposed humanity's membership from the very beginning. His voice echoed through the chamber like a cold wind. Ambassador Chen, the council has reached its decision. Humanity is found guilty of unauthorized innovation. Your species developed faster than light communication technology without council approval. This is a violation of the Technology Restriction Treaty. Earth will pay a fine of 40 trillion credits and submit all research to council oversight. Lara did not flinch. She had expected this. For 2 centuries, humanity had followed every rule, respected every tradition, and bent to every demand. They had sent their best engineers to fix problems on distant worlds. They had sent doctors to cure plagues they did not create. They had sent peacekeepers to calm wars between species who had been fighting for millennia. And in return, the council had treated them like children who did not know their place. Furthermore, Yothmari continued, human representatives will be removed from all council's scientific committees. Your species has proven it cannot be trusted with sensitive knowledge. A ripple of approval moved through the chamber. The elder species nodded to each other. Finally, the upstart humans would learn humility. Ilara raised her hand, and the chamber fell silent. She looked up at the thousands of faces staring down at her. Some were hostile, some were indifferent. A few, very few, looked worried. "High Chancellor," she said, her voice calm and clear, "I have listened to your judgment. Now, I have a response." She activated the resignation chip. It flashed bright blue, and a tone rang through the chamber. Every screen, every display, every holographic projection suddenly showed the same message in every language. Earth Federation formally withdraws from the Galactic Council. For a moment, no one moved. Then chaos erupted. Yothari slammed his staff against the floor. "This is not possible. No species has ever left the council. You cannot simply walk away." Ilara smiled. It was not a warm smile. "We just did." "You will be isolated," a Thracian delegate shouted. "No trade. No protection. You will wither and die alone in your little corner of space." "Perhaps," Ilara said, "but that is our choice to make, not yours." She turned and walked toward the exit. Behind her, voices rose in anger and confusion. Someone called for guards to stop her, but Ilara kept walking, and no one touched her. Even now, even in their anger, they were a little bit afraid of humans. They had always been afraid, though they would never admit it. At the door, she paused and looked back one final time. "You made a mistake today. Not the sanctions. Not the fine. Your mistake was thinking we needed you. We never did. We stayed because we believed in cooperation. We stayed because we thought we could build something better together. But you have made it clear that you do not want partners. You want servants?" She shook her head slowly. "We do not serve." Then she was gone. Within hours, the news spread across the galaxy. Humanity was leaving. Not just the Council, but Council space entirely. A protocol called Exodus had been activated. Every human in the galaxy had received the same message: come home, on 40 different worlds. Human engineers shut down their projects and packed their tools. Human doctors finished their final surgeries and said goodbye to patients they had treated for years. Human teachers gave their last lessons and wished their students well. Human peacekeepers handed over their posts to confused replacements who had never actually done the job alone. The ships began to arrive at human borders. Thousands of them. Cargo vessels loaded with equipment, passenger ships filled with families, military escorts guarding the flanks. It was the largest organized movement of people in galactic history. It happened in just 72 hours. The Council watched in disbelief. They had expected protests. They had expected negotiations. They had expected humans to beg for forgiveness. Instead, humanity simply left. High Chancellor Yathmari addressed the Council 3 days after the last human ship disappeared into slipspace. His voice was confident. His words were proud. The contamination has been removed. For 200 years, humans have disrupted our traditions and challenged our authority. Now they are gone, and the galaxy will finally know true order. Let this be a lesson to all young species who forget their place. The chamber erupted in applause. Delegates congratulated each other. The Valkyrie and the Thracians shared a toast for the first time in centuries. It felt like a new beginning. It felt like victory. But on orbital station Nexus 7, a maintenance worker named Crixel noticed something strange. A light in the main corridor had gone out. He called the repair department, but no one answered. He checked the maintenance schedule and found it empty. He searched for the manual and discovered it was written in a language he could not read. The language was human. Crixel stood in the flickering corridor, staring at the useless manual in his hands. A cold feeling grew in his chest. He walked to the next corridor and found another broken light, then another, then a water recycler making strange sounds, then an air filtration unit blinking warning signals that no one understood. He tried to call the Council emergency line. The system was down. A human technician had been scheduled to update it last week. The technician was gone now. They were all gone. Crixel looked out the window at the vast darkness of space. Somewhere out there, humanity was sealing its borders and starting a new life without the Council. And here on Nexus 7, the lights were going out one by one. No one knew how to turn them back on. The first crisis came on the 4th day. Orbital Station Nexus 7 served 6 million Valkyrie, and its water recycling system had stopped working. Crixel had spent 3 days trying to understand the manual. The words swam before his eyes, meaningless symbols in a human language that no one had bothered to learn. There must be someone who can read this, he said to his supervisor. Someone who studied human languages. His supervisor laughed bitterly. Why would anyone study the language of primitives? We have translation devices for that. But the translation devices were not working either. A human software engineer had been scheduled to update them. Now the update would never come. Crixel watched the water levels drop hour by hour. In 14 hours, 6 million of his people would begin dying of thirst. He sent emergency messages to every station he could reach. The responses were all the same. We have our own problems. Across the galaxy. The unraveling had begun. On the planet Arcelia, the food distribution network collapsed on the 5th day. For 30 years, human logistics experts had managed the flow of supplies from farms to cities. They had made it so efficient that no one questioned how it worked. Now, no one remembered. Ships arrived at the wrong ports. Warehouses overflowed while stores sat empty. Fresh produce rotted in one district while people went hungry in another. The Arcelian government tried to fix the system, but every change made things worse. They did not understand that the entire network had been rebuilt from scratch by a team of 12 humans who had worked without recognition or thanks. On the border worlds, pirates attacked on the 7th day. For decades, human peacekeepers had patrolled the space between the Dominion and the Hegemony. These two empires had been at war for 3,000 years before the Council forced them into an uneasy peace. The humans had kept that peace, not through threats or weapons, but through respect. Both sides trusted humans, because humans had no stake in their ancient conflict. Now, the peacekeepers were gone. The Dominion accused the Hegemony of moving ships into neutral territory. The Hegemony accused the Dominion of arming pirates. Within 2 weeks, the first shots were fired. Within a month, 3 border systems were burning. High Chancellor Yothmari called emergency sessions daily. He blamed the chaos on human sabotage. He said they must have damaged systems before leaving. He said they had planted traps and hidden weaknesses throughout council infrastructure. But the truth was simpler and more terrible. Humans had not sabotaged anything. They had simply been holding everything together. The jump gates failed on the 12th day. These ancient structures allowed ships to travel between stars in hours instead of years. The Council had used them for 10,000 years, and no living species remembered who had built them. When the gates began to malfunction, Council engineers rushed to repair them. They found human tools, human notes, human modifications. "This is impossible," the chief engineer reported to the Council. "These gates are ancient technology, sacred relics of a lost civilization. And yet," Yothmari demanded. The engineer looked uncomfortable. "And yet the maintenance logs show human engineers have been keeping them running for the past 100 years. The original systems failed long ago. The humans rebuilt them from scratch and never told anyone." The chamber fell silent. The Velkari delegates exchanged worried glances. The Thracians shifted uncomfortably in their seats. "Why?" Someone asked. "Why would they do that without telling us?" The engineer shrugged. "The logs say they tried to tell us. They submitted 17 reports over 60 years. All 17 were rejected by the Council Science Committee as unnecessary human interference in elder technology. Medical systems failed on the 15th day. On 40 worlds, hospitals discovered that their most advanced treatments had been developed by human researchers. Patents and procedures that everyone assumed were ancient council knowledge turned out to be human innovations from the past. Dr. Vethanal, the most famous surgeon on Thrace Prime, stood in his operating room and stared at his equipment. Half of it would not work without human-designed software. The other half required human-manufactured components that were no longer being shipped. "I have 300 patients in critical condition," he told the Council Health Committee. "Without human medical supplies, they will die within the week." The committee promised to find alternatives. They found none. The humans had not stolen or hidden anything. They had simply taken their knowledge with them when they left. Trade routes collapsed on the 20th day. The great merchant fleets had relied on human navigators and human translators for generations. Humans had a strange gift for understanding other species. They could look at a Velkari merchant and a Thracian buyer and somehow find common ground between them. Without that gift, negotiations fell apart. Contracts were broken. Ships sat idle in ports because no one could agree on prices or schedules. The collective of minds, a hive species that had always considered itself superior to individual beings, sent a formal complaint to the Council. Their complaint was 2 words long: "Fix this." Yothmari had no answer. On the 30th day, he swallowed his pride and sent an envoy to Earth. The envoy carried gifts and apologies and promises of better treatment. He traveled to the edge of human space and requested permission to enter. The response came from a single human patrol ship. "The Sol system is closed to Council traffic." "Turn around," the envoy tried to explain the situation. He described the failing systems, the collapsing trade routes, the millions who would die without human help. He begged for mercy. The human captain listened to every word. Then she said, "The Council voted to sanction humanity for unauthorized innovation. You said we were a contamination that needed to be removed? Congratulations. You removed us. Now, live with the consequences." The envoy returned home empty-handed. In the archives of Nexus Prime, a junior archivist named Silvera was searching for old technical manuals. She hoped to find something that could help repair the station's failing systems. Instead, she found a file that had been buried in the deepest levels of the archive. The file was labeled Human Contingency Assessment. It had been written by the Council's own intelligence bureau 50 years ago. Most of the document had been redacted, marked classified by order of the High Chancellor himself, but the summary remained visible. Silvera read it 3 times to make sure she understood. The summary said, "Human integration into Council systems has reached critical levels. If humanity were to withdraw from Council space, cascading failures would affect 73% of all infrastructure within 30 days. Economic collapse would follow within 90 days. Military vulnerability would increase by 400% within 1 year. Recommendation: do not allow humanity to leave the Council under any circumstances. If they attempt to leave, use any means necessary to prevent their departure. Silvera sat in the dark archive, surrounded by the dust of forgotten knowledge. The Council had known. They had known for 50 years what would happen if humanity left, and they had driven them away anyway. She thought about sending the file to the High Chancellor. Then she thought about what had happened to the last person who told Yuthmari something he did not want to hear. She closed the file and walked away. Above her, another light flickered and died. No one came to fix it. The galactic emergency beacon had not been activated in 800 years. It was designed for extinctional-level threats, the kind of danger that required every species to unite or die. When the beacon lit up across every screen in Council space, people stopped what they were doing and looked up at the sky. The message was simple: unknown hostile contact in the Kareth system. All available military assets respond immediately. The Council fleet gathered within hours. 3,000 warships from dozens of species formed the largest fighting force assembled in living memory. They jumped to Kareth, expecting pirates or rebels or perhaps a rogue warlord with stolen weapons. They found something else entirely. The spatial anomaly hung in space, like a wound in reality itself. It was darker than the void between stars, a tear in the fabric of existence. And from that tear, shapes emerged. Thousands of them. They had no consistent form, shifting and twisting like shadows given life. Some were small as fighters. Others were larger than battleships. All of them moved with terrible purpose. The Council called them the Hollow. Possible, Admiral Cathrell of the Valkyrie fleet whispered. The Hollow were destroyed 12,000 years ago. The founders sacrificed themselves to seal the breach. But the Hollow had returned, and they were hungry. The battle lasted 6 hours. Council ships fired every weapon they had. Energy beams passed through the Hollow without effect. Missiles detonated harmlessly against their shifting forms. Only physical projectiles seemed to cause any damage, and even those required direct hits to the creature's cores. The Hollow did not fire weapons. They simply touched Council ships, and those ships died. Hulls corroded in seconds. Power systems failed. Crew members reported hearing whispers in their minds before falling silent forever. When it was over, 40% of the Council fleet was gone. The survivors retreated in chaos, their formation shattered, their confidence destroyed. Admiral Cottrell made his report to the Council from the bridge of his damaged flagship. His voice was hollow. We cannot fight them. Nothing we have works against them. They came through the breach, and they kept coming. When we retreated, they did not pursue. They simply moved toward the nearest populated world. There must be records, Yuthmari demanded. The founders defeated them before. How did they do it? The archives were searched. Ancient files were recovered, and a terrible truth emerged. The founders had not defeated the Hollow alone. They had been helped by a younger species known for their strange neural patterns and their stubborn refusal to surrender. The records were fragmentary, but one detail was clear. Only weapons guided by these beings could reliably target the Hollow's cores. Something about their minds, their way of thinking, created a resonance that the Hollow could not escape. The species was described as small, fragile, and impossibly determined the species was human. We need them back, Admiral Cathrell said. Without human targeting systems, we cannot win this war. Yuthmari closed his eyes. For a long moment, he said nothing. Then he rose from his seat. I will go myself. I will beg if I must. The survival of the galaxy is more important than my pride. He traveled to the Sol system border with a small diplomatic vessel. No warships, no escorts. Just the High Chancellor and a handful of aides. They arrived at the boundary of human space and transmitted a request for contact. A single human corvette appeared. Its name was painted on the hull, Defiant. The commander was a woman named Reyes. She had dark hair and tired eyes, and she looked at Yothmari's image on her screen with absolutely no expression. "Hi, Chancellor," she said. "This is unexpected. Commander Reyes, I have come to ask for humanity's help. The Hollow have returned. They are destroying our worlds. Our weapons cannot stop them. We need your people." Reyes nodded slowly. "I heard about Kareth. Bad business. Then you understand why I am here. Please. Whatever we did to offend humanity, I apologize. Whatever compensation you require, we will pay. Just help us fight this enemy." Reyes was quiet for a long moment. Then she transmitted a file to his ship. "Open that." Yothumari opened the file. It contained records, thousands of them. Every insult directed at humans in council chambers, every sanction imposed on Earth, every vote to restrict human rights, human movement, human innovation, 200 years of contempt, cataloged and organized. "You called us vermin," Reyes said. "You said we were a contamination. You told us we needed to learn our place. And now you come to us because you need us to die for you?" She shook her head. "Go home, Chancellor. Ask your council how many of those votes they would like to take back. Then maybe we can talk." "People are dying," Yothmari said. "Millions of innocent people who had nothing to do with those votes." "I know," Reyes said, "and I am sorry for them. But I have my orders. Soul space is closed." She paused. "For what it is worth." "Chancellor, I hope you find another way." "I truly do," as the transmission ended. The Defiant turned and vanished into the darkness. Yothmari returned home in silence. Inside human space, the debate raged. General Marcus Stone sat at the head of the Emergency Defense Council, watching his officers argue. Some wanted to help immediately. Others wanted to watch the council burn. "They treated us like animals for 200 years, Colonel Way said. "Why should we shed human blood for people who hate us?" "Because those creatures won't stop at the council border," Dr. Yuki Tanaka replied. She was young, barely 30, but she had studied the Hollow her entire career. The Hollow are drawn to sapient thought. Every thinking mind is a beacon to them. If the council falls, we're next. "Then we build better defenses," Colonel Way said. "We protect ourselves and let the galaxy sort out its own problems." Dr. Tanaka shook her head. "You don't understand. The Hollow don't conquer. They consume. Every mind they take makes them stronger. If they consume 4,000 species, they will be powerful enough to breach any defense we build. We need the council to survive even if we hate them." General Stone listened to both sides. He was an old man, a veteran of conflicts that most humans had forgotten. He had served on alien worlds, protected alien children, buried alien friends. He knew the galaxy's cruelty better than anyone in the room. "Dr. Tanaka," he said finally, "if we help them, how many humans will die?" She looked down at her datapad. "Projections vary. Best case, tens of thousands. Worst case, millions. And if we don't help, then the Hollow win, and everyone dies. Humans included." Stone stared at the star map on the wall. Red dots marked Hollow incursions. They were spreading like a disease, consuming system after system. Each represented billions of lives already lost. "The council hurt us," he said slowly. "They humiliated us. They drove us away. And they did it because they were afraid of what we could become." He stood up and walked to the map. "But being treated badly doesn't give us permission to become bad. That's what they never understood about us." He turned to face his officers. "We're going back. Not for the council. Not for Yothmari. For the people who had no say in how their governments treated us. For the children who never voted for anything. For the ones who will die screaming if we do nothing." Colonel Way started to protest, but Stone held up his hand. "I know the cost. I know some of us won't come home. But if we let billions die because our feelings were hurt, then we're not the people I thought we were." He straightened his uniform. "Prepare the fleet. We leave in 48 hours. Dr. Tanaka watched him go. She thought about the odds, the numbers, the terrible math of war. Then she gathered her research and followed. There was work to do. Outside, in the darkness between stars, the Hollow continued their advance. They did not know fear. They did not know mercy. They only knew hunger, and they were getting closer. The Hollow swarm had reached the inner systems. Nexus Prime, the ancient capital of Council Space, was under siege. Billions of beings huddled in shelters, watching the sky darken with shapes that defied understanding. The Council fleet had formed a defensive line, but everyone knew it would not hold. This was the end. Then the sky changed. Ships appeared from nowhere. Not dozens or hundreds, but thousands. 10,000 human warships dropped out of slipspace in perfect formation, their hulls gleaming with weapons that Council species had never seen. At their center flew the flagship Constellation, and from its bridge came a single broadcast that reached every receiver in the system. This is Fleet Admiral Alara Chen of the Earth's Federation Navy. We are not here for the Council. We are here for the innocent. All civilian populations remain calm. Help has arrived. High Chancellor Yothmari stood on the observation deck of his command station, watching the human fleet spread across the sky. His hands trembled. He had gone to them begging for help, and they had turned him away. Now they were here anyway. I don't understand, he whispered. Why would they come? His aide had no answer. Admiral Chen did not waste time with speeches. Her orders flowed through the fleet with military precision. Human ships moved to intercept the Hollow advance. Human weapons began to fire, and for the first time the enemy fell. The Council forces watched in amazement. Their most powerful attacks had barely scratched the Hollow. Human weapons tore through them like they were made of paper. Every shot found its mark. Every missile struck true. Dr. Yuki Tanaka had explained the science before the fleet departed. Human neural patterns created a unique resonance that interfered with the Hollow's dimensional structure. When a human mind guided a weapon, that weapon became deadly to creatures that otherwise existed between realities. It was not magic. It was simply how human brains worked, but to the Council species watching their salvation unfold, it might as well have been magic. The ground war was worse than the space battle. Hollow creatures had already landed on dozens of worlds. They moved through cities like nightmares, touching victims and leaving empty shells behind. Council soldiers tried to fight them, but their weapons were useless. They could only watch and die. Then the human dropships arrived. Sergeant Kofi Asante hit the ground on Velkar Prime with a rifle in his hands and fire in his heart. He was 34 years old. He had been born on Mars and raised on stories of how the Velkari had voted to restrict human immigration. His grandmother had been denied medical treatment on a Velkari station because humans were considered lower priority. None of that mattered now. Move, he shouted to his squad. Civilians are trapped in the Central District. We push through. We get them out. We hold until Ivak arrives. They pushed through streets filled with shadows. They fought things that should not exist. Private Chen fell first, taken by a creature that came through a wall. Corporal Williams was next, buying time for a group of Velkari children to reach safety. By the time they reached the Central District, Kofi had lost half his squad, but the civilians were still alive. Hundreds of Velkari huddled in a government building, surrounded by hollow creatures trying to break through the walls. Kofi and his remaining soldiers formed a defensive line at the entrance. They held that line for 6 hours. 6 hours of constant fighting, constant fear, constant loss. When the evacuation ships finally arrived, only Kofi and 2 others could still stand. A Velkari child tugged at his sleeve as he helped her onto the ship. Her 4 eyes were wide with confusion and gratitude. "Why did you come?" she asked. "Your people left. You did not have to save us." Kofi looked at her, and for a moment, he thought of his grandmother. He thought of every insult, every restriction, every vote that had told humanity they were not welcome. Then he thought of this child, who had never cast a vote in her life. Because someone had to, he said. The story of Sergeant Asante spread across the galaxy. Other stories followed. Human soldiers dying to protect species that had scorned them. Human medics treating wounded aliens before treating themselves. Human pilots flying suicide missions to buy time for evacuations. On world after world, the pattern repeated. Humans came, humans fought, humans bled. And when the council asked why, the answer was always the same: because someone had to. Admiral Chen coordinated the war from the Constellation's bridge. She barely slept. She watched casualty reports scroll across her screens and forced herself to keep reading. Every name was someone she had sent to die. Every death was her responsibility. General Stone stood beside her during the worst moments. "You're carrying too much," he told her one night. "You can't save everyone." "I know," she said, "but I can try." The council leadership tried to take control of human forces. They sent orders demanding that Admiral Chen report to their command structure. They insisted that human ships follow council tactical protocols. Chen's response was polite but firm. "We appreciate your input. However, Earth Federation forces operate under Earth Federation command. You may advise. You will not command. Not anymore." Yathmari was furious. He called her arrogant. He accused her of using the crisis to humiliate the council. He demanded that she respect ancient traditions of galactic authority. Chen let him finish. Then she said, "Chancellor, your traditions brought us here. Your authority drove away the only people who could save you. I am not here to humiliate anyone. I am here to end this war. When it is over, we can discuss the future. Until then, stay out of my way." The tide slowly turned. Human scientists discovered that the dimensional breach could be sealed, but it required energy sources that only existed on certain council worlds. The technology to harvest that energy existed, but only council engineers understood it. For the first time, both sides needed each other equally. Dr. Tanaka led the scientific effort. She worked beside Velkari physicists and Thracian engineers, sharing human knowledge without reservation. "We're not here to prove we're better than you," she told them. "We're here to solve a problem. Pride can wait." The council scientists were suspicious at first. They had spent centuries believing that humans were primitive newcomers with nothing to offer. Working beside human researchers showed them how wrong they had been. Human methods were different, not inferior. Human ideas were strange, not stupid. By the end of the first month, the teams had become something new. Not human, not council. Just people trying to save their universe. The final assault came on a day that would be remembered forever. The breach had to be sealed from the inside, and that meant someone had to fly a ship through the rift and detonate a dimensional charge at its heart. It was a one-way mission. Admiral Chen volunteered. General Stone forbade her. They argued for an hour before a junior pilot named Lieutenant Sarah Okonkwo solved the problem. "I'll go," she said. She was 26 years old. She had joined the Navy because she wanted to see the stars. Now, she would see what lay beyond them. "You don't have to do this," Chen told her. Okonkwo smiled. "Someone has to. Isn't that what we keep saying?" Her ship flew into the breach while the combined human and council fleet held the hollow back. The last transmission from her cockpit was a single word: beautiful. Then the breach collapsed, and the hollow began to die. "The war was over, Admiral." Chen stood on the observation deck of Nexus Prime as the last hollow creature faded into nothing. Beside her stood Chancellor Yothmari, looking older than he had ever looked. "Why?" he asked. "After everything we did to you, after I came begging, and your Commander Reyes turned me away. Why did you come back?" Chen did not look at him. She watched the stars instead. "Because you, being cruel, doesn't give us permission to be cruel. That's what you never understood about us, Chancellor. We don't help people because they deserve it. We help people because helping is what we do." Yothmari was silent for a long time. Then, slowly, he bowed his head. "I have spent 200 years hating your species. I told myself you were a threat, a contamination, a disease that needed to be contained." He looked up at her with something new in his eyes. "I was wrong. I was so terribly wrong." Chen finally turned to face him. "Yes, you were. But wrong can be made right. That's what tomorrow is for." She walked away, leaving him alone with the stars and his shame and the first faint hope of redemption. 1 year after the Hollow War ended, the Galactic Council chamber stood empty. The crystalline spires still rose toward the artificial sky, The seats still circled the central floor in perfect rings. But no delegates filled those seats, and no voices echoed through the ancient hall. The Galactic Council, which had ruled for 12,000 years, was gone in its place. Something new was being born. The Galactic Concordat held its first meeting in a building that had never existed before. It was built on neutral ground, a space station constructed by human and alien hands working together. The architecture mixed styles from 100 worlds. The halls were filled with beings who had been enemies a year ago and were now trying to become friends. Ambassador Ilara Chen stood at the entrance. Watching delegates arrive, she wore civilian clothes now. The uniform was gone, folded carefully in a drawer she rarely opened. Admiral Chen had won a war. Ambassador Chen had a different battle to fight. Could lead this, General Stone told her. He had come to see the opening ceremony, though he claimed he was just passing through. They offered you first speaker. The highest position in the new government. You earned it. Chen shook her head. Leadership isn't a prize, Marcus. It's a responsibility. And the galaxy doesn't need another human telling everyone what to do. They need to learn how to work together without us holding their hands. Then who? She smiled and nodded toward a young Velkari walking through the entrance. He moved awkwardly, clearly uncomfortable with the formal clothing and the importance of the occasion. But his eyes were bright with determination. Him Crixel, the maintenance worker from Nexus 7. Stone raised an eyebrow. The one who couldn't read the water recycler manual? The same? He spent the war learning, not just human technology, but human philosophy, human history. He wanted to understand why we came back for people who had hurt us. Chen watched Crixel shake hands with a human delegate, both of them smiling. He understands now, better than most of his own leaders ever did. The ceremony was simple. No grand speeches, no ancient rituals. Just representatives from 100 species standing in a circle, making promises to each other. The Concordat would be different from the Council. Membership would not be based on age or power. It would be based on contribution and character. Species that had been dismissed as young or primitive would stand equal to those who had ruled for millennia. Some of the elder species did not like this. The Dominion of Thrace had almost refused to attend, but then their ambassador had stood before the gathered delegates and done something no Thracian had done in recorded history. He apologized. For 3,000 years? My people have treated conflict as strength and cooperation as weakness, he said. His voice was rough, as if the words were being torn from his throat. We called humanity primitive because they chose peace when they could have chosen war. We were fools. They are stronger than we ever were, because they are strong enough to help those who hurt them. He looked at the human delegation. I am sorry. My people are sorry. We hope to learn from you if you will teach us. The human ambassador, a young woman named Dr. Yuki Tanaka, rose to respond. She had led the scientific effort during the war, working beside species that had dismissed her kind as backwards newcomers. Now she spoke for Earth at the dawn of a new age. We do not want students, she said. We want partners. We have knowledge to share, but so do you. The Concordat is not about one species leading others. It is about all of us walking together. She smiled. Humanity made mistakes too. We isolated ourselves. We built walls. We let our pride stop us from asking for help when we needed it. We are not perfect teachers, but we can be good friends, if you let us. The applause that followed was not thunderous. It was quiet, hesitant, like the first steps of a child learning to walk. But it was real. In the months that followed, the Concordat grew. Species that had feared the old council found courage to join the new alliance. Trade routes reopened, this time managed by diverse teams instead of human specialists. Technology was shared freely, but with education, not dependency. Human engineers did not just fix problems, they taught others how to fix them. Teach them to fish became an unofficial human motto. Some aliens did not understand it. Humans tried to explain, then gave up and just did it anyway. Chancellor Yothmari did not join the Concordat government. He retired to a small estate on Velkar Prime and began writing. His book was titled The Humility We Lacked. It was an honest account of his failures, his prejudices, and the slow, painful process of realizing he had been wrong about everything that mattered. The book became required reading in schools across the galaxy. Young people studied it alongside human philosophy and human history. Trying to understand the strange species that had saved them, monuments rose on 100 worlds. Stone and metal and light shaped into memorials for those who had fallen. The largest stood on Nexus Prime in the shadow of the old council chamber. It was a simple pillar of white stone, surrounded by gardens where children played. The inscription was written in every language known to the Concordat, to the humans who came back anyway. Sergeant Kofi Asante stood before that monument 1 year after the war's end. He had been promoted twice and offered a dozen medals. He had turned down most of them. The only thing he kept was a small stone from Velkar Prime. It was given to him by the child he had saved. Her name was Serena, and she visited him sometimes. She was learning human languages now, determined to read human books in their original form. She wanted to understand why a man with every reason to hate her people had carried her to safety instead. "I still don't fully comprehend," she told him one day. "My tutors say humans value something called compassion, but compassion for enemies seems illogical." Kofi laughed. "It probably is illogical. Humans aren't always logical. We're stubborn. We're emotional. We do things that don't make sense because they feel right." He looked at the monument, at the names carved into its base. "Maybe that's our greatest strength. We don't let logic talk us out of being kind." Serena considered this. "I would like to be stubborn like that," she said finally. "Is it something that can be learned?" "I think so," Kofi said. "It starts with choosing to see people instead of categories." "You're not a Velkari to me, Serena. You're a kid I helped on a bad day. That's all." She smiled, and for a moment, the differences between their species seemed very small. Earth opened its borders for the first time since the departure. Alien visitors walked human streets, marveling at the strange and beautiful world that had produced such a strange and beautiful people. They ate human food and listened to human music and tried to understand human humor, which remained mostly incomprehensible even to the most dedicated scholars. Admiral Chen, now fully retired, took a teaching position at a university. Her class was called Introduction to Interstellar Relations, but it was really about something simpler. It was about understanding. Her students were mixed, human and alien, sitting side by side. They argued constantly. They disagreed about history and politics and the proper way to organize a society. But they argued as equals, and when class ended, they walked out together. On the last day of the year, Chen stood before her students and asked a question. "Who can tell me the most important lesson of the Hollow War?" Hands rose. A Thracian student suggested military preparedness. A human student proposed scientific cooperation. A Valkyrie offered cultural exchange. Chen smiled. "All good answers, but not what I was looking for." She walked to the window and looked out at the stars. "The most important lesson is this: cruelty is easy. Kindness is hard. When the council hurt us, we could have hurt them back. We could have watched them burn and called it justice. But we didn't. We chose the harder path." She turned back to face them. "That choice is the only thing that matters. Not our technology. Not our tactics. Our choice. Every day, you will face moments where cruelty is easy and kindness is hard. The future depends on which one you choose." A Thracian student raised her hand. "Admiral, the histories say humanity could have let the galaxy burn. Why didn't you?" Chen smiled. It was the same smile she had worn years ago. Standing in the council chamber with a resignation chip in her hand, making a choice that changed everything. Because the measure of a people isn't how they treat those who are kind to them. It's how they treat those who aren't. She looked out at the stars, at the vast and complicated universe that had tried so hard to break humanity and failed. We're human. It's what we do. The class ended. Students filed out, talking quietly among themselves. Thracians walked beside humans. Velkari debated with members of the collective. The universe was still broken in 1,000 ways, still full of conflict and misunderstanding and pain. but it was healing, and somewhere in the darkness between stars, a new generation was learning that strength did not mean dominance, that power did not mean cruelty, that the greatest victory was not defeating your enemies, but turning them into friends. The Galactic Council had fallen because it forgot this truth. The Galactic Concordat would rise because it remembered, in humanity, strange and stubborn and impossibly kind, would be there to help light the way.